He was just yelling on the train when the guard ruthlessly ripped his clothes, hung a countdown timer around his neck, and clamped a steel ring onto his arm. Then, they opened a small window and shoved his arm outside. The man screamed in agony, but after only 3 seconds, he suddenly went quiet. The air outside was minus 100 degrees Celsius, his arm had instantly frozen solid. The guard raised a massive iron hammer, ready to strike. When the countdown hit 0, the man's arm was pulled back inside the carriage. After confirming it was completely frozen, the guard swung the hammer down hard. No one in the car full of poor passengers dared to say a word. The Earth had long entered a new ice age, and only 1% of humanity had survived, packed inside this perpetual train that had been running for 17 years. But even on this tiny train, society had split into rigid classes. The rich lived luxuriously in the front cars, indulging in endless pleasure and extravagance, while the poor were crammed into the filthy tail section, surviving only on blocks of disgusting black protein jelly. Worse still, the rich would occasionally snatch children from the poor cars without explanation. A single complaint from a poor man could lead to brutal punishment. One day, the people in the tail section finally reached their breaking point. As the guards opened the door to distribute the black food blocks, the leader of the poor, Nick, decided to risk everything. After years of careful observation, he had come to suspect that the guards' guns might not even be loaded. To test his theory, the fearless Nick pushed through the crowd and pressed a guard's rifle directly against his forehead.
They've got no bullet!
When he saw no reaction, his suspicion was confirmed, the guns were empty. At once, the poor raised a long metal pole they had secretly prepared, jammed it into the doorway, and forced the carriage doors open. With no bullets to fire, the guards were quickly overpowered. But just then, a huge man wielding an iron hammer started swinging wildly, keeping everyone at bay. That's when a curly-haired young man stepped forward. Using his speed and agility, he darted in close and drove a dagger straight into the strong man's heart. With the path clear, the rebels rushed to the onboard prison and freed a father and daughter who had been locked away. The man was a master locksmith, and his daughter had a unique ability, she could hear what was happening beyond the carriage doors. Under the man's skilled hands, the heavy door ahead slowly opened. Inside, there was no one. For the first time in more than 10 years, the poor caught a glimpse of the world outside. The frozen landscape left them in awe, but there was no time to admire the view, they had to move quickly before more guards arrived. The next door they opened led to the food production car. What they saw made Nick freeze in horror. The black protein blocks they had been eating for years were made by grinding up cockroaches. Rage filled him, he wanted to kill every last one of the rich. Just then, the girl heard movement behind the next door. But it was too late, the locksmith had already finished unlocking it. As the door slid open, a group of guards stood there, glaring at them, their axes raised and ready to attack. Just as the poor were gearing up for an all-out fight, the guards suddenly strapped on night vision goggles. Before the rebels could even react, the train plunged into a pitch-black tunnel. Unarmed and blinded, the poor became helpless prey in the dark. The guards butchered them mercilessly. Amid the chaos, Nick suddenly shouted, "Fire!" The call was relayed from one person to another until it reached a young boy at the very back of the train. Moments later, the boy passed a small flame forward. And soon the entire car was illuminated with makeshift torches. Light returned to the darkness, and the tide of battle turned. The poor seized the advantage, and Nick even managed to capture the mayor who was leading the guards. When the train finally emerged from the tunnel, half of the poor were dead. An elderly man pleaded with Nick to stop moving forward. If they continued, everyone would die. But Nick was determined. He insisted that they had to reach the engine room and take control of the train. To prevent further casualties, he chose only 4 people to go with him, leaving the rest behind to hold their position. As the 5 of them pushed deeper into the train, Nick's understanding of this world was shattered once again. Each new carriage revealed more luxury, lush gardens growing fresh fruits and vegetables, tanks filled with seafood, and entire herds of livestock bred for the rich. He even saw children receiving elite education, while the poor's children were stolen away to serve unknown purposes. Just as rage boiled inside Nick, a bald man appeared, calmly pushing a cart full of eggs. He smiled and said they were New Year's gifts, free for everyone to eat. But kindness wasn't what he had in mind. In the next instant, the bald man whipped out a submachine gun and opened fire, catching the rebels completely off guard. Luckily, the curly-haired young man acted fast. He threw a knife that struck the shooter down. Dropping to the floor, he pretended to be dead and narrowly escaped. The same couldn't be said for the poor left behind in the tail section. On the surveillance monitor, Nick saw them all gunned down by the guards. Consumed with fury, he grabbed a gun from the floor and executed the captured mayor. With only 3 comrades left, Nick pressed on. As they advanced, they saw the full extent of the rich's excess. The wealthy passengers looked at the intruders with disgust, as if their very presence was an insult. Then, suddenly, the train took a sharp turn. Guards from the rear cars spotted the rebels ahead and opened fire. Nick and his team fired back, but neither side managed to land a hit. It was then that the locksmith noticed something strange. A snowflake drifted through a crack in the wall and didn't melt upon landing. That could only mean one thing: the world outside wasn't as cold as they had believed. But there was no time to dwell on it. The group hurried forward, seizing the chance to reach reach the next car while the guards were still behind them. Moments later, the guards burst through the door only to walk straight into a trap set by the poor.